Hi, I'm Marianne Ramirez-Land, Senior Educational Consultant with Paxton Patterson, and today I am very happy to bring you this presentation, How Equitable CTE Helps Break the Generational Cycle of Poverty. First, I'd like to thank you for joining me. I know you have a lot of ways to spend your time, and I am guaranteeing that you will get something good out of this. So I spend all my time in the realm of CTE, and these are topics that I'm really passionate about. There's also some personal information in here, and I hope that you will find resources you can benefit from and share those with your team. On that note, here's what you should get out of this presentation. First and foremost, I want you to feel inspired. It's been a really tough couple of years, and it's great to find ways to uplift yourself and those you work with to know that what you do does matter. Tools are very important, so I'll be including facts from cited sources you can use to continue this conversation with your team, as well as details about specific funding, ways to advocate for that funding, and curriculum that you may use to address these issues. So the very first thing we need to understand is the generational cycle of poverty itself as a phenomenon and how this happens. So you'll notice the title of my presentation includes equity. And let's start there. Equity is, of course, a critical ongoing conversation in education, whether it's written into your mission statement, included in your short-term goals or LCAP, or you've built a task force around it in the district. Any conversations about equity that don't include career technical education are incomplete. This presentation highlights key insights and correlations, as well as recommended actions you can take right now to make real change for your students. While platitudes such as access, opportunity, and success come from a good place, they sometimes miss the elephant in the room, poverty. We've made changes in terminology, such as the shift from at risk to at promise to refer to students who may fail to earn a high school diploma for a variety of reasons, including economic disadvantage. However, there's still ongoing challenges. Education Week has outlined for us that effectively what happens is students are raised in poverty. They become adults themselves. They don't have the knowledge or ability to stop working, to go back to school, and it happens again, right? So Education Week is proposing that we ensure access to opportunities and entry into high-paying careers to help break that. So we allocate this specific funding, such as Title I, which provides financial assistance to local educational agencies with high percentages of students from low-income families, and that's great. So we talk about it, we fund it, but we have to ask ourselves how those efforts are impacting equity so far. The Center for Public Education's research brief on educational equity identifies these ongoing issues, which is that childhood poverty in the US is still fairly high at 22% and rising. Distressingly, after decades of progress in integrating schools, we've begun to witness their resegregation by race and poverty. Garrett Orfield and his team at UCLA's Civil Rights Project report that minority students are also subject to double segregation by race and poverty. The typical Black student, for example, attends a school with a 2/3 poverty rate. As you may know, schools can vary in the ways that they are funded, whether by local property taxes or by the state. And so the general wealth of the area can also therefore impact the way that that education is delivered and offered to students in that area. Now, according to the Center for Public Education, advocates are increasingly concerned with allocating the resources and opportunities to learn that will equip all students to succeed after high school, recognizing that some students require more support than others to get there. In the US today, our poorest students are nearly 4 times as likely to fail in math than their wealthiest peers. So if we're to close the achievement gap completely, we must address current inequities in funding, access to high-level curriculum, and access to good teachers. And money is the clearest indicator of educational equity between districts, which brings me to the next segment of this presentation, which is how we break this cycle. The National School Boards Association suggests funding, high-level curriculum, and addressing absenteeism to help resolve this problem. And that's going to be the structure for the rest of this presentation. We're going to address each of those. However, we are going to look at those through the lens of career technical education, because we're really trying to focus on actionable approaches to solving these problems through the world of CTE. So let's get started. Now, the first topic here is career technical education funding. And I, of course, want to highlight the opportunity of ESSER, which has been referred to as a once-in-a-generation funding opportunity. Funding for school improvement comes from many sources, as I previously alluded to. But if you have a significant school population suffering from the effects of poverty, then you probably also have a significant ESSER award. And that's because it was awarded to states in the same proportion as Title I. As part of that $280 billion for schools invested in the past year, Congress set aside approximately $13.2 billion of CARES, or coronavirus aid relief, for the Emergency and Secondary School Emergency Fund, ESSER is the acronym. And next, I'm going to show you how to find out how much you received and how using it for CTE can make a big impact for your students in poverty. So I'm going to toggle between screens here because I want to actually show you how this works. I'm going to go to this link. Aha. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is click the ESSER 2 and 3 box here at the top. Then you're going to change your state drop down to California, or if you're watching from another state, whatever is appropriate for you. And then you'll just type in your district. And you'll be able to find examples here. So you want to look at the ESSER 2 and 3 total. There's also some per student calculations here. This is the district I grew up in. Okay, going back to our presentation. So that link is included here in the source. All of these links are down at the bottom of the pages. Very illuminating, and I'm going to give you some additional examples. So Oakland Unified in Northern California received $190 million between rounds 2 and 3 of ESSER. Fresno Unified, larger district, is at $631 million. And Los Angeles Unified, by far the largest district in the state, received $4 billion. So let's remember that was $13.2 billion nationally. 4 of that went to LA. It's just amazing. It's a lot of funding, right? So there's actually more funding than just ESSER as part of all of this. Now, this is updated as of May 2021. Without a doubt, some of it has certainly been spent and claimed, but there are absolutely districts still trying to figure out what to do with all of this. And you should not assume that CTE is going to be a part of that, which means you need to be involved in the direction that your district takes, which leads me to my next point. Here's the thing. ESSER funding is clearly designed to help at-promise students, and in the post-COVID timeframe, it's meant to help schools address learning loss. And the definition of acceptable uses for this is actually quite broad, but the funding buckets are also very deep. So we have to ask ourselves if the topic of generational poverty could truly be addressed if some of it were spent on high-quality CTE. Now, ACTE, the Association for Career and Technical Education, does seem to think so, and they've drafted a brief I've linked to in my source here to help educational leaders think critically about how funds can be leveraged to support systemic improvements in equitable access to high quality CTE for every learner. The most important thing is having a seat at that table. Do not accept that your district has already decided what it's going to do. Go to those meetings. When you speak at those meetings, check out some of the messaging that ACTE suggests, which begins on page 9 here. They're effectively underscoring the fact that CTE is our best tool for re-engaging secondary students who've struggled during COVID by showing them how education is relevant to their future. And I'm going to give you more information on that in the coming slides. ACTE specifically recommends purchasing tools and equipment, expanding lab space and access, investing in new programs, and expanding career exploration. So we have a few sources indicating that CTE is a road out of poverty, and there seems to be this pattern that high-level curriculum is a part of that. However, before I get knee-deep into helping you research the connections between career exploration and reducing poverty, we're going to take a brief detour with a real-life story of how CTE can break the cycle of poverty, and this story happens to be my own family's. So this is my lovely mom here at the bottom right. She is an X-ray tech or radiologic technician at Redwood City Kaiser, and she works in the angiography department, which is known as neurointerventional radiology. She also has an associate's degree from Kenyatta College, which is a community college in the Bay Area where we grew up. Now I forgot to mention quickly, she makes almost $300,000 a year. Now she's on call a lot of the time, which means she has to be within a half an hour radius of the hospital. And when the employees there are on call for that particular duty, they're earning money whether or not they get called in. And when they do get called in, they make more. So if she were not on call, she'd probably make about half of that. But she also wouldn't be allowed to work in that department if she was not open to being on call, because it's necessary. They respond to strokes, aneurysms, life-threatening serious issues. All right. So that earnings potential is impressive. I know, right? But that's not how it began. So here's my sister and I. We were happy kids, of course, but we didn't understand the turmoil that went on to keep that roof over our head and the food on the table. When we were around these ages, I was about 5 and my sister was about 3. My mom was reflecting on the fact that my dad was struggling with alcoholism, and she was in a dead-end job with no real opportunity for earnings improvement. And it wasn't just us in the house either, right? We were a multi-generational household, and there were 7 of us in one house. Everyone of working age worked. So my grandpa ran a forklift in a warehouse. My grandma ran daycare, and she also sold crafts. My mom was in a clerical position, as I mentioned. My father was working in sheet metal in kind of the construction world. My Aunt Casey taught aerobics and waited tables while she went to school. And I got my first job when I was 14. Now I was working before that, but this was my actual first W-2 kind of job. So I can guess how some of you are wondering how my mom found out about that job. Now, she did go to high school in the Bay Area, but she didn't participate in CTE during high school. It was actually my grandma who found an article in a magazine about the top 5 fastest growing careers, and one of them was X-ray tech. So she mentioned that to my mom, who looked around and found that she could pursue this program at a local community college for just 2 years. Now, that said, it was not instantaneous high earnings. She did get paid well, but she worked her way up to better pay, but without going through additional degrees and going back to school. So she started in mammography. And then when the opportunity came to do professional developments or training at conferences, usually over the weekend at her own expense, she did that. So it was actually kind of upsetting to hear a couple of years ago, my grandma told me that one time she went to one of these and she could not afford food. So she actually had to pack fruit and power bars in her suitcase in order to go. It really was a struggle for her, but she did it. Now, because she was on call all that time, there were a lot of missed events. And, I mentioned earlier that I started working at age 14. That's not an exaggeration. I could see how tired and hardworking my mom and dad were. And as soon as I started to understand that burden and what it could mean financially for me to help, I got a job. I knew I couldn't make a lot of money, but I could at least pay for school supplies and the clothes we'd get at the beginning of each school year. Cue my obsession with thrift stores, as you can see from this outfit. Now, I did tell my mother, much to her disappointment, that I wanted to be an artist when I was 16. It's one of my paintings behind me. And I was making my decision based on the typical approach students take. They're reflecting on, what am I good at and what do I like to do? Now, I was good at art. I liked art, so I decided to go to art school. Now, I wasn't considering the third leg of that tripod, which is the reality of that thing as a job. How much can I earn, right? Avid wasn't around then, but if it was, I may have taken that course because I was the first in my generation to go to a 4-year college. I did not have any savings for that. And I acquired quite a bit in student loans that I am still paying down. Now, all of that said, there is a happy ending here because my mom's hard work paid off. She travels extensively. She bought a second house where she's able to take care of my grandma after my grandpa passed away. My sister moved into our childhood home with her growing family, and she started college savings for, excuse me, my nephews and niece, which are my sister's kiddos. So my sister also became an X-ray tech. She has 3 kids, and they've been on more trips in the past few years than I've taken in my entire life. So I'll stop boring you with my family photos, but I did that because it's relevant. It's one thing to speak to you about what could happen, right? But this is a real life example of what did happen. And I know it because I've lived it. I've witnessed it. It's also part of the reason I love what I do with Paxton Patterson, and also part of the reason I'm such a big fan of our medical imaging unit. Now, We've wrapped that detour, and we're focusing on high-level curriculum as a tactic to help break the generational cycle of poverty. For my mom, that was offered at a community college, and she found out about it because of her mother. However, for many of your students living in poverty, the odds are much higher that their family won't have exposure or suggestions beyond their immediate circle of familiarity. They don't know what they don't know. It's that simple. So pay attention, because this is where you have a beautiful opportunity to make a real difference. What we're going to look at next is how providing access to these types of opportunities, in this case, healthcare occupation exposure, can make an impact for the underserved community in our own backyard. Now, next is a brief video showcasing one of our programs with our high-level CTE curriculum at a continuation school in Oakland.
Today here at Dewey Academy, we're hosting a grand opening for our health lab.
This is an amazing space where students have an opportunity to explore 12 different health science career fields. With each field, they learn a little bit about what the professionals have to do in that area.
I learned how to take people's blood, take people's vitals. I also learned how to stitch.
We got to learn how to strap a person up in a medical board.
I had the privilege of teaching the first working period here at Dewey, and to have students enter the health lab who doubted themselves and didn't see themselves in a health career. And as they progressed through the 6 weeks, I saw confidence increase. I saw students become more independent and really see what they're capable of. I saw a big increase in confidence and also interest in exploring health careers.
Miss Cheyenne, she opened my eyes to this stuff. She showed me like what I could do as an African-American male.
Not too long ago, I did get in a car accident and my friends was hurt, and I was able to like wrap up their arms and stuff because they did have bruises on their eyes and stuff, and they had it on their arms. They teach you more of life skills. They show you situations that you really gonna be in.
We invited industry partners, community partners to view students in our health lab so that they would be able to see how students have hands-on practices and skills to move into the health field.
2 of my students, they got 2 internships with the HEAL program, the Highland Hospital HEAL program.
It was a Highland internship where I get to learn behind the scenes, like I get to see the surgeries and just learn like hands-on about like what doctors do at the hospitals.
So every time I knew I had that class, I was like super excited to go over there. Everyone's super nice in there, and all they want to do is help you gain more knowledge.
What they learned and their drive to dig deeper into the professions and go to school to actually be able to become a nurse or a surgeon, they have really risen.
I love that video, and I hope you felt uplifted by it as well. Healthcare itself is an excellent example of high-paying careers, and obviously I'm biased in more ways than one. But what I also want to do here is emphasize how we can expand horizons. So Career Tech Ed is historically very focused on high school, but we're going to begin to touch upon earlier access here and elaborate on how we might give students this exposure. Next, we're going to watch a brief animation that contextualizes the way we typically go about this exposure and the changes we might make to shift these perspectives.
Meet Julie. She's about to graduate high school. Julie wants to be an engineer. She wants to have an exciting career and make a difference in the world. So she begins filling out college applications. But she has a problem. She doesn't know what type of an engineer she'd like to be. To be honest, she's not really sure what it means to be an engineer, or if she'll enjoy being an engineer, or if it's truly a good fit for her. What she does know is that the education is going to be expensive. What if we could send Julie back in time? Back to an earlier point in her education, and expose her to a wide array of careers and hands-on experiences with authentic technology in those areas. We'd put Julie in teams, problem-solving with real-world challenges to help her discover her interests and skill set. We teach Julie about specific career pathways and prepare her to pursue the pathway that makes the most sense for her before she graduates. Now, what if we could do the same for all the other students and prepare them to identify a college and career pathway that makes sense for them before they graduate? Well, now we can. With College and Career Ready Labs. From Paxton Patterson.
All right. So let me be clear, with regard to what I'm referring to with this early exposure to career exploration. I'm not talking about a research project, right? I'm not talking about a counselor popping into a classroom once each year with a presentation, which is not bad, right? It's just only a part of that picture. I'm talking about something more concrete and impactful for students. We are still focused on high-level curriculum. And what I'm suggesting is that you give students hands-on opportunities. Telling a student about medical imaging is one thing, and believe me, I've done it a lot. Giving that student the chance to practice an endoscopy is another. You see here, a student is looking at x-rays within the medical imaging unit from Paxton Patterson's Health Science Careers Program. And telling you how much my mom earns is one thing, right? But showing a student what that job actually feels like is another. So giving them the opportunity to develop interest and demonstrate aptitude is entirely high level. Then helping them discover that they can go to their own local community college to get that training, and then focusing in on the actual pay they can earn and the actual jobs they can get within a realistic time frame is a gift all of its own. It's truly powerful. Speaking of powerful, if you get nothing out of this presentation other than the video recommendation I'm about to make, I'll be happy for you. So what is so critical for everyone to understand in education, not just teachers, not just counselors, students, parents, administrators, district level, is that 4-year-plus degrees are not the only way for students to exit the generational cycle of poverty. The true ratio of jobs in our world is actually 1 to 7. And what that means is for every 1 job requiring a master's degree or better, there are 2 jobs requiring a bachelor's and 7 requiring less, like my mom and what she does. So this is detailed exceptionally well in the video, Success in the New Economy. I'll repeat that. It's called Success in the New Economy. You can find it in both English and Spanish. It's on YouTube. It's on Vimeo. You can find it from Dr. Fleming's site. The link is here at the bottom. This is an excellent video to share during like college night or back to school night or something like that. But it's also just really great for your counselors to watch and to kind of have them understand the way that education and labor are actually connected to help us guide students better. That video was created by Dr. Kevin Fleming, an educational researcher and the Dean of Career Tech at Norco College. His recent book, Redefining the Goal, goes into more detail about how we miss the mark with a laser focus on 4-year degrees. Now you can see here this infographic from his book, and I know it's probably a little tough to read, but I'm going to elaborate on effectively what it says. 100 students who began high school in California in 9th grade, out of that 100, only 7 of them actually graduate high school, go immediately to college, and both graduate and are not underemployed for their degree by age 28. This is kind of the dream that we sell kids, right? But you can see it's not necessarily the way it really works out. So it becomes clear that we can't rely on pushing all kids to college as a method to end this madness. Dr. Fleming states, current circumstances show that we should not simply direct our youth to get a 4-year degree in something under the false pretenses and unrealistic expectations that it will lead to success. The obtainment of a 4-year university degree can be valuable in a number of ways, but it's no longer the golden ticket to financial success that it was for prior generations. Now, what we should do instead is look at ladders, which is a path within middle skills extremely similar to what my mom did. Now, this starts with accepting the fact that you have students right now who are already thinking that they can't go to college, regardless of the grade levels you work with. I'm sure there are some of you who are teachers, some of you who are administrators. Now, think back. Can you remember a time that you had a student ask you for something to eat? Usually the answer is yes. What was the very first thing districts did when schools closed for COVID? What I noticed was how immediately and how impressively districts made sure their students had meals, because you can't learn if you're hungry. And while you can't possibly be all things to all students, their caretaker, their chef, their teacher, I know you care about this, or you wouldn't be watching this presentation. So pause for a moment to give yourself a little pat on the back, because I appreciate you. There are parents who should say it and won't, and they appreciate you. And you should be proud of yourselves. You guys are doing a good job. All right. So back to the nuts and bolts here. Let's talk about this fantastic report from the University of the Pacific in Stockton. So we're shifting this mindset to introducing skills to middle skilled jobs requiring specialized training, industry certifications, or 1 to 2 year degrees as a ladder out of poverty. It's well described in this analysis I've linked to by the University of the Pacific. And even though this is specific to their local labor market, the focus on allied health on page 28 is just an example illustrating the potential of this path and this thought process, which is where this graphic comes from. So the median healthcare wage in the Stockton area is 134% higher than the average for other occupations. And there's a forecast of growth of over 1,100 jobs annually through 2026 in that field. So there's high paying opportunity, and that's great. But let's step back for a second and embrace the fact that students may need to work right away. This diagram shows how a student who's interested in healthcare but not able to attend a 4-year college right out of high school might begin as a medical assistant and grow their income with additional vocational training or certifications to become an LVN or licensed vocational nurse, and then later progress to a higher paying RN or registered nurse while working and earning the entire way, which is particularly critical for students who are coming from a generational cycle of poverty. Again, we're talking about equitable CTE here. So I'll take this moment to emphasize that middle skilled careers and these kinds of educational options are equally viable for all subsets of students. Despite our best efforts with AVID, a college-going culture, and other supports, only 9% of students from low-income families graduate from college, according to the College Success Foundation. But that doesn't mean they're doomed to repeat the cycle of poverty if they receive high-quality intervention on the topics of careers and not academics alone, especially if it's done early. The Sage Journal research article, Actions Against Poverty, the Impact of Career Technical Education, analyzed outcomes of students with disabilities as well, stating, findings suggest that in high relative poverty areas, participation in CTE is associated with higher rates of employment during and after high school. So curriculum like Paxton Patterson's College and Career Ready Labs can be implemented in middle school. We also have an elementary program now. So we're talking about that early exposure to give students this kind of hands-on experience with job skills from all different industry sectors or career clusters within one course. It's effectively a wheel within a wheel, right? So we have dozens of units like alternative energy, nursing, digital manufacturing to help students discover where their interests and aptitudes intersect. Entry-level and middle-skilled careers are highlighted alongside occupations requiring advanced degrees. So students know how much they can earn, what level of training or education they need, where they can get that training, and which companies are hiring, all before they even get to high school. So as we move on to the third and last recommended approach to helping break the generational cycle of poverty, I'm going to segue by emphasizing the when, because students entrenched in poverty are more likely to drop out, and they may do it earlier than you think and for reasons you might not expect. The good news is it's very easy to address with programs like ours. So at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that the Center for Public Education also points out absenteeism as a primary issue with equity. Ask any high school teacher who did distance learning, and they can attest to the way COVID has emphasized this problem. Students from families who are struggling to make ends meet were pulled into the workforce or tapped to provide childcare. And I'm still seeing the echoes of that kind of pattern and habit continuing to occur now, even with most districts returning to full in-person instruction for months now. According to the report from America's Promise Alliance in this summary, 3 out of the top 5 reasons students drop out of high school relate to engagement in a way that can be addressed by quality CTE. So if students are most at risk of dropping out if they are bored, don't think school is relevant to their lives, or need to make money to support family, you can drastically reduce these risks by enrolling them in engaging CTE courses. That's what students who did drop out have to say anyway. 81% of students who dropped out in this survey, which was from a report by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation titled The Silent Epidemic Perspectives of High School Dropouts, those surveyed said that relevant real-world learning opportunities would have kept them in school. I work a lot with alt-ed, and this is not surprising to me. So since the correlation between absenteeism and equities is described in terms of suspensions, you might consider a new approach to the suspension altogether. If you could take those students exhibiting problems likely related to disengagement, and instead of suspending them, taking them out of school, they could be assigned time in a career exploration lab What do you think might happen? If your district includes the middle grades, take note of this following detail. It's not just high school students that drop out. According to this data from the Hetchinger report, which is a fascinating article, I think in particular for administrators in California to read, thousands of middle school students drop out each year, and we may not even notice. In California, 6,400 middle school students dropped out between 2012 and 2013 alone, but they don't always end up on the radar of support services since dropout prevention is largely focused on high school. Now, as you can imagine, there was a bill in 2009 pushing the state to go further to require publication of the middle school dropout rate, which, like the high school dropout rate, would have compared students who began in 7th grade to those that enrolled in 9th grade 2 years later. However, the state has struggled to produce that figure because it didn't necessarily get the extra funding to comply with calculating that rate. So who knows what these numbers are today in reality, especially COVID. Now, I think this particular quote is very telling because not only is Dr. Eduardo the Los Angeles County Superintendent of Schools, she's also a teen mom and high school dropout. Talk about inspiration. But this is also someone who understands this situation firsthand. And she's telling us we need to start earlier than high school. So at the beginning of this presentation, I promised that you would be inspired, have tools with cited sources, and end up with resources for funding, advocacy, and curriculum. I'm going to go over one last tool now. To contextualize this tool, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Paxton Patterson in case you don't know who we are. So we're a CTE curriculum partner. We focus on labs, college and career building labs for the middle school level. I mentioned earlier, we're also introducing elementary career labs this year for grades 4, 5, and 6. That can be used as intervention before school, after school, or summer school. And we also have UC A through G approved high school programs in healthcare and construction. Because these are turnkey programs, we try to make it as easy as possible for you. I empathize with how difficult it's always been to be a teacher, and it's probably harder now than it ever has been before. So rather than asking you to take on this worthy challenge, but making you build it yourself, we're providing all the curriculum, all the assessments, which the system will automatically grade for you. The learning management system is where those things are delivered and housed. All the tools and materials necessary to do a 70% hands-on project-based learning course are included. The curriculum is aligned with standards for CTE. It's got all of the activities and supplies ready to go and built in. We set it up for you. We support you with all of the questions or concerns you have. And of course, we train you. Now, all of the units end with specific career research related to the activities that they've tried. So this whole presentation has been contextualized within CTE. It's also the way that we approach delivering these engaging courses context. I'm going to show you this tool now. Okay, so the links that I was referring to in a previous slide, basically at the beginning and end of each unit, it's going to show students, hey, here's 6 to 10 different jobs related to the activities you've just done, and it will guide them through career research. So I'm going to show you this tool because it's completely free and it's something that you can use with students now. mynextmove.org is a website that's correlated with data from Bureau of Labor and Statistics. There's a little survey students can take right here. If that's built into our student orientation to help them decide what they want to do. And then the teacher can look at that information and make choices on where they're going to put those students in terms of their units and their rotations. But you can also browse jobs by industry here or search by specific career terms, right? And so let's do that with my mom's job. Look at radiologic technician. You can see that comes up here. And once you find those titles, there's a lot of great information here. At the top, you can see there's little videos that kind of show what they do, even personality traits you may want to have to be in this kind of a role. But the information that we tend to focus on during these worksheets as part of the career research in our modules is the level of training or education and the level of pay. So we'll look at find training. And you can put in your local zip code or state. And this will pull from that data to let you know who's offering programs. So you can see here within 50 miles of Sacramento, you have Yuba College offering an X-ray tech program, as well as San Joaquin Delta College. Now, I think there's also one in the Sac City, Los Rios Community College District, but that didn't come up. So there's other things you can try, which is finding certifications or finding licenses, which may give you additional options. Now, we also want to look at local salary, because on the face of it, $62,000 is nice, but that's not necessarily what they're going to make here. So if we look at that local salary info again, you'll see that X-ray techs average about $110,000 in the Sacramento area. Now, of course, this is a bell curve. On the high end, $160,000. And that's higher than in California in general. So in our worksheets, one of the things we ask students is if their regional pay is higher or lower than the national average and why they think that is. The logical information here is probably they don't have enough people to fill those roles. Now, we can look at that information further by looking at find jobs. And this will show us who's hiring. One of the things I like to show teachers is sometimes we can see the date posted. How long have they been looking for this person? You can see here there's a posting from 2018. So it's probably part of the reason the pay is a little higher here if it's tough to find these people. And you can see there's a mammo tech position that's been posted pretty recently, which is how my mom started. And so we can look at this and see what they want in terms of the requirements. This is a big chunk, but it looks like qualifications: current state licensure with American Registry for Rad Techs, current BLS or CPR cert, mammo tech cert, 12 months in mammo or a comparable job. So pretty accessible. This is exactly the kind of information we want our students to have as they're looking for their options. It's something you can use to guide them. All right, well, this was an activity that we did do in person. So if you catch me at a conference and I'm doing this presentation, we'll do that as an activity, and you'll have a little primer to how it works. Here's 5 things you can do right now. So 1, look up that ESSER funding with that link. It's going to be staggering for most of you. 2, loop counselors into the conversation. In particular, you can share that Success in the New Economy video link with them or a recording of this presentation. Identify your underserved groups. You might have a particularly large, differently abled population. Maybe there's quite a few newcomers or EL students in your region, or maybe it's just a general amount of socioeconomic development issues that need to be addressed for you. Share this presentation or article. I have an article version of this as well. And then contact us about your goals. So, here at Paxton Patterson, we're all about uplifting students and making it easy for teachers and administrators to do that. This is my contact information, but our general website is paxtonpatterson.com, and our number is 877-243-8763. So I hope you found this information helpful. I really appreciate you joining us today. And of course, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Take care.